You are listening to the Boundless Enigma podcast with Sam Zins
and Ryan Mulkentine. On this podcast, we dive into the mind, reality, and existence itself to provide you with boundless ideas and insights. What I was just talking about before we started this podcast was the idea that suffering is grace. It's a quote that I heard originally from Ram Dass. And then later on, I heard Duncan Trussell talking about this idea of like suffering is a method to then like awaken. It's like a tool. Like originally, like you go into this process of like trying to like better yourself, like going into spirituality and like Buddhism, like learning like Stoicism and all these different things to like help you feel better and like live a better life. Ultimately, like at first you start out doing that because you want to feel the negative lows less, you know, but then as you go further into the process of like becoming a better human being and like going through this like spiritual process, you start to use the lows and like look forward to the lows as like ways. It's like in the acceptance of the suffering, you can start to feel like peace and like openness in a way.
Yeah, absolutely. Because like I feel like once you feel the harshness of it, or like what it feels harsh, but like once you get past that, we kind of recognize that like, okay, like that was a big learning process that I just went through. And I guess maybe what you're saying is like maybe becoming more conscious of that process and kind of realizing that like, yeah, I'm not feeling the best right now, or like this X, Y, and Z isn't going the best right now, but that doesn't mean that's how it has to be. And that's something that can be worked on and is currently being worked on, whether it, appears that way or not.
Yes. But there's also like something, the reason why I bring it up is because it's something that like I've been experiencing like pretty strongly in like the last week of like yesterday I like came out of class and I was feeling like really just low and like kind of like low energy and kind of like, like those moods where you're just kind of like,
Yeah. I felt that way today actually after class.
Yeah. Like those moods happen all the time. And I think like the fact that that they're going to happen again and like what happened was like I just accepted it at that moment. I was like, you know what? I'm not going to try to like fight it. I'm not going to try to like push for like a positive mood. I'm not going to like go to the gym and like try to like work out to make myself feel better. It's like I don't feel like doing any of that. I feel like going on a walk and like just like wallowing in my sadness in a way. Yeah. And in that moment of like acceptance of like how I was feeling, like I like connected with like the present moment so deeply that I was like, oh man, like this is like suffering is the path to feeling like connected. If you know what I mean? Like the resistance to the suffering is like the barrier between like you and like blissful reality.
Right.
I was just walking along this lakeshore path on my campus has this lake, and I was just walking there and I just like was sitting there like sad, just like looking over at the lake. I was like, holy fuck, this is beautiful. And I was just like sad, and the sadness was so beautiful. I don't know how, like, do you know what I'm saying? Like the suffering led to like a blissful state somehow.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it was Sam Harris that I heard say this was something along the lines of like, like we all like believe in like happiness, sadness, like, nervousness, all these different emotions. And I think like as society, like we have like learned these emotions to be certain ways. Like if you're happy, it's a good thing. If you're sad, it's a bad thing. Like somebody in your life passes away and like, you're mourning over them. Like that's very sad. That's a bad thing. You don't want that to happen. And, not to say that we want it to happen even no matter what way we look at it, but I think having a better attitude, like you said, towards it and just like letting ourselves feel that way and like almost like entrenching ourselves in that feeling and recognizing it rather than like glazing over it and then trying to like push ourselves to happiness, like right. Forcing it through, that's not always the way to go about things.
I think like the problem with that is that like when like, you view happiness as good and like sadness as bad when like in reality, like it's not good or bad. Like it just is kind of what it is.
Hmm.
and your interpretation of that is what makes it good or bad. But if you start to interpret your negative emotions in a positive way somehow, of like, oh, like my sadness is a means to connecting with reality on a deeper level, then sadness is actually good, you know? And
Hmm.
it's like good and bad is very relative to your perspective,
Yeah,
you know?
absolutely. We all have different definitions for everything. That's why, like, I'm a big believer in like not using labels as much as possible, because even though I definitely still use labels, like everybody does, but like I feel like labels kind of confine us to believe one thing about this certain thing, or like believe that it's this certain way. When in reality, like as we were just talking about with our emotions, like they can you can take it however you want to take it. It's just that generally speaking, a lot of people take it as like good and bad, or
Yeah.
like in the middle or whatever. So yeah, absolutely. I think that's a good point.
Have you been listening to any Sam Harris lately?
Um, not like super recently, but like I always dabble into Sam Harris from time to time. What about you?
Nice. I have not been listening to him like much at all. I remember I used to,
Mm-hmm.
like 2 summers ago, I was really into listening to him. Do
Uh,
you like who's like your main like guy right now that you're like listening to and like learning about from, like learning these deeper truths from? Like who's your what's like your method of learning?
honestly, I listen to a variety of people because I think it's important to get a variety. Um, Obviously we have our favorites. Like Sam Harris is definitely one of my favorites that I've listened to over the years. And then Leo Gura, actualize.org. He's definitely somebody I like a lot. But actually, what I've been doing recently, I'd say, is kind of like listening to myself more, because I feel like
Oh,
I can get caught up listening to other people and what they think and what
yeah,
like their ways of doing things. And then once I journal, I kind of realize like, oh, I have my own ways of doing
yeah,
things. And like, obviously, it's important to listen to other people and get feedback and everything,
yeah,
but it's also important to like listen to yourself and figure things out.
definitely. I think like it is important to like listen to people and like get like the hidden gem for you. It's like they have this whole philosophy, and like I feel like I get very like entrenched in their viewpoint for like a month or something, where like at least like with like Leo Gura, like I'll like watch his videos for like a month and just be like super into his stuff, and then
Mm-hmm.
I'll be like, okay, I'll have a natural process of like reining myself back in, and then being like, okay, he's not like gospel, and
Mm-hmm.
then kind of listening to myself more, and then taking just like the best parts of his philosophy and integrating those, but like not like taking his stuff as like dogma. And like over time, I think there's like a process of like getting really, for me at least, it's like I get really into like a philosophy, or I get really into somebody's stuff, and then like get burned a little bit by going too far on them,
Right.
and then like like cutting away the stuff that like wasn't helpful,
Mm-hmm.
and then like being like, like what about this is good for me? What about this philosophy is like
Mm-hmm.
bad and too far?
Yeah, absolutely. And like I relate that to that on the degree of like, I'll listen to Leo Gura or whoever for a while and like get really entrenched. And then I kind of like realize that I'm kind of like almost searching for an answer, or not just searching for an answer, but like looking for like a right way to do things. And like we were just talking about with like, you can view good and bad as, whatever you want it to be. The right and wrong is similar to that in the sense of like, you can view things the way that you view them, and there's not always a right or a wrong way, and you can do things the way that you want to do things. And I think that I like I was saying, I agree with you about how listening to these people can kind of get me to that point where I kind of realize like, oh, I need to take a step back and kind of like think for
Yeah,
myself for a minute.
definitely, definitely. Can we just acknowledge for a moment that this is our first podcast episode?
Yeah, man, dude, this is awesome.
This is pretty cool.
Yeah, man, I can't believe that it's happening. I this is a dream.
Yes, the Boundless Enigma.
Yes, sir.
Pretty
It's
cool.
awesome, man.
Yeah.
Hopefully everybody sticks around, man.
Yeah.
What do you
I
think?
hope so. I hope like our tribe can like listen to this and be like, oh, like nobody likes to talk about this stuff, but we're talking about it and they're
Yeah,
talking about it. And that's awesome. That's why I'm going to stick around.
yeah, and I think what's so awesome about like how we're going about this is that like we're like shamelessly doing it, you know? I mean, I
Yeah.
like who knows where we're gonna end up? We're starting with nothing right now. Like
Yeah.
we don't. I mean, we might have a
Right.
few friends that'll like tune in, but besides that, like
Have you heard of like um this? I heard this idea that like when it comes to like attraction and dating, like it helps to be like so unapologetically yourself that like some people get turned off,
yeah,
but in the same process, like a couple like few people will be like very very attracted to you,
mhm,
versus like if you're just like kind of like a bland, like you're trying to please everybody, then everyone's kind of like and then nobody really likes you but nobody really hates you either. And so like if we're being unapologetically ourselves here, it's like a lot of people are going to be like, what are they talking about, this like spiritual stuff, this like universe bullshit. But
mhm.
the people that get it are going to be like, yes, they like, I know what they're talking about, and they're going to be like deep into this, you know what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think if you would have told me that like we'd be having this kind of conversation, like if you told me that like 3 years ago, I would have been like no way, like I
Yeah.
wouldn't have even been able to comprehend what we're saying on any degree. Um, but now I'm here, and I hope that by us talking about this kind of stuff, and being unapologetically ourselves, can hopefully help some people kind of like break out of a box, maybe, because I think that's
Yeah.
what happened with me, is that like I started listening to like Sam Harris and Leo Gura, and they kind of helped me break out of a box and almost make me feel okay to be to talk like this and think like and
Yeah.
like process my thoughts and everything, because I think
Yeah.
in general, like it doesn't feel okay before you kind of realize it is okay.
Right. So like, so this podcast is like a way to facilitate more discussions that can help people like break out of these constricting boxes, you
Right,
know?
right.
And
Absolutely. That'd be
I mean,
awesome.
that's just one aspect of like what
Mhm.
this is about, you know? Like I think the name like kind of says it all, like the Boundless Enigma. It's like, do you want to explain like a little bit about like what you think that name like means?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, when we were thinking about it, it was a hard process to pick, a name, because it could go anywhere. But
Yeah.
boundless meaning you know infinite, never ending, like, and just constant learning of, or
Right.
listening, whatever,
Yeah.
of just anything,
Yeah.
about anything and everything.
Right. It's like
Yeah.
the enigma that is this existence, that is this reality, that is this universe, this code that's like just impossible to crack, but people are still chipping away little bits by little bits at it. Like the ways that you can go about trying to solve this great enigma, going about trying to how to understand it, all the questions you can ask is like it's infinite.
Hmm.
You know, it's really boundless, the ways that you can like dive into what's happening right here, right now, like what is going on. Like there's so many things to talk about. And that's at least to me, like that, I feel like that is a great title for our podcast, because it just leaves an open door for like an infinite amount of like questions and openness to whatever reality has to offer us, you know?
Yeah, absolutely. Because I think that with that name, like you said, it really just leaves doors open, and uh, considering that we don't even know like much at all, like as much as we think we know, there's like quadruple the amount that we don't know. That's obviously a random
True.
number, but
Yeah.
it just the point being that this is kind of like helping not only listeners, but also ourselves kind of further, and hopefully become better at being able to like put ideas and questions out there.
Definitely.
But
Definitely.
it's awesome. But I had something that I'd like to talk about, which I was journaling last night, and figured not figured it out, but wrote this down, and it was about the process. And by the process, I mean um, just any kind of process, whether it be the biggest process, which is what I've kind of discovered last night, which is life. And in our experience, the biggest process that we will ever have is life. And a general breakdown is being born, conceived, and then living out your life into adulthood, then then eventually passing away at some point. Um, and so it's all a process. And obviously, there's a ton of smaller processes within that gigantic process.
Right.
And I think like recognizing those patterns and processes kind of
Huh.
help discover different things about yourself and others along the way, you know?
Yeah. So like where are you in your process?
That's a really good question. I think I'm in a process of learning how to remain calm, you know? Like I feel like anybody who knows me would probably say that I am a calm person. I'm a calm and quiet person, but it doesn't always feel that way, you know. And while I do recognize or resemble calmness, I feel like in my innards, um, it doesn't always feel that way, and I'm definitely not immune to, you know, like unhappiness or sadness and whatnot. Um, and so I think I'm just in a process right now of just learning how to cope with those things and
Yeah.
better approach them
Yeah.
on really, you know.
It's like when you say process, like it makes me think of like something that's like dynamic and like something that's like constantly changing and
Hmm.
like I've noticed myself like now that you say that, like I've noticed myself like going through a process of my own too of like really I think the process that I'm in is like an emotional growth process of like how do I manage my emotions, like what do I do when I feel really bad, like what do I do with that? And I feel like 2 years ago I would not, like if I was feeling depressed, like I wouldn't know what to do with it. I would get mad at myself for feeling that way. I
Hmm.
would be sad about feeling sad and like just double down on my sadness.
Hmm.
And like I think slowly, like maybe a year ago, then I would probably be like frustrated for a while, and then like after like an hour feeling that way, then I would be like, okay, let's try something else. Let's try accepting it, and then that would feel better. And up until today, where like I'm getting to the point where like I can like get myself to accept my negative emotions like pretty easily, and then they're like they don't go away. Like the negative emotions are still there, but I'm like slowly going through the process of like making peace with my emotions, and like letting them kind of run their course,
Hmm.
and it's like this dynamic thing that like slowly gets better. And then who knows, maybe like once I get so good that there's something beyond emotions that can help me live better. That I think I'm in like an emotional process right now personally.
Yeah, absolutely, and that makes perfect sense. And and like you were talking about how you've seen the progress. I like to like relate the mind as to like something physical, like strength training or something like that, and like lifting dumbbells or whatever. And like the mind is a very similar thing in the aspect of you train it by you know paying attention to it. You don't have like it's not the same as lifting in terms of like you're actually physically doing something, but sometimes it does require that. But you know paying attention to it and actually like trying to figure something out, and trying to get better at it,
Yeah.
and that's something that's never ending. And
Yeah.
emotionally definitely is something that
Yeah.
is there.
Or like just learning to like just like the little, I don't know how to describe it, like there are some things you can't learn really quickly because they're so subtle.
Hmm.
Like when it comes to emotions, like some things require practice because they're so subtle that like it takes 10 different depressive episodes until you realize, oh, this one thing is that's causing it is like that this one thing that's making it worse is such a subtle thing, but just by like changing one little attitude, that like that makes it better. But you don't know that until you've experimented around like several different times. And I think that that's part of like the exercising the mind of like the more that you are like consciously observing your thoughts and how your brain works, like the more you're going to pick up on the little things, and the more little things you pick up on, the more of the puzzle you have completed, you know.
Hmm. Yeah, and like the more you recognize, the more you can be like more like proactive about, and like actually trying to like tackle an issue rather than
Right.
letting it sit there and like ruminate. because I
Yeah.
think that's something that I'm also working on right now, is getting better at not like, just ruminating on an issue, or not even ruminating, but also ignoring and just like accepting it too soon, because like
Yeah.
sometimes I'm too quick to be like, oh, you know what, that's all right, I can deal with that, and then eventually it gets to a point where it's like, this is like bugging me. I need to actually like look at this issue and go solve it, because it's
Yeah.
something that's affecting my life on a daily basis or something.
I think it's hard to know like when it's time to solve and when it's time to like sit back, though.
Absolutely.
And it's like, because then like I think there's a trap there of like of doing, trying to solve, trying to like push, whereas like it's counterintuitive to like let go into a situation or let go into something when like I sometimes like letting go is like, or like just not trying and like actively not trying or actively letting go of whatever thing you're struggling with is like the solution. But like that's completely counterintuitive. I mean, it's not always like, there's definitely times that you need to be active, but it's frustrating like that sometimes you need to let go and sometimes you need to work on it, and it's hard to know like when which situation is right, you know?
Yeah, absolutely, because like sometimes it just sneaks up on you and you don't recognize it, and then sometimes sometimes you might get it soon, and that's obviously the goal, is to try to catch those things as soon as possible. But sometimes, like in my life, it feels almost like I'm making like a circle. It's like, and then once the circle's filled in, that's when that like right as the circle fills, that's when I got active about it, and then it's like, oh, like I see the big picture now, and it's like this whole growth process almost.
Yeah. Yeah. I love those like aha moments where you're like, oh,
Yeah.
like I don't know, like to me, like they're like mini awakenings or like little like like they're not like insights, they're like experiences that you feel in like your body, and you're like, oh, like this. I don't know, like I love those moments you just like you figure it out for a second. It's like the word like eureka, like that's what that word
Yeah,
means. Like it's
yeah.
the feeling of like finally like understanding something that you've been trying to figure out for so long. And like I think that there's a lot of those moments that you can have like on this path, like,
Oh,
and I think
absolutely.
those moments are those like aha eureka moments of like, peace, I've found it. It's like that's honestly like the reward, like that's the treat, like that's why I'm
Yeah.
kind of doing this.
Yeah, and like it kind of sounds weird to say that it's a reward, because it's like like you figured something about, like about a life process, like how's that a reward,
Yeah.
but like like I feel like once you get it, like everybody's had it to some degree or another, but like once you realize that you can have these like far more often than you did before,
Yeah.
it does become a reward, because it's like, wow, this is actually helping me,
Yeah.
to get
Yes.
the things I want in life.
It's like you can, they're like treats that are like applicable, and they don't have the same like blissful feeling, but like you can then apply it to your life and just like live a happier, more peaceful life with these new insights that you get.
Yeah, yeah, because I mean, like, people will chase like material items and money and whatnot, and while that can be very like uh, dopamine releasing to get or have, it's not necessarily teaching you about life in a sense. And but what people, I feel like, even myself, don't fully realize sometimes, is that you can learn these life lessons that can help you get these material items or money or whatever you want. Like you can become financially stable if you
Yeah.
put your mind to it.
Yeah. And that like all these like goals and like material things that people want or after, like I want to get this degree, I want to get this job, I want to become this title, I want like this much money, I want to have a house, I want to have a family. It's like they're all mental first. It's like you have this goal and they're physical goals, but like you wouldn't think that like to get to these physical goals you would need to master the psychology behind it first, which is like I think it's true. And I think like the emotional work behind like achieving your physical real world goals is like the toughest part of that. It's like overlooked.
Yeah, dude, absolutely. And something that like clicked with me with what you were saying there was like talking about the process, like it's a process to get to these points, you know, because I feel like a lot of the time in my life specifically, I like, you know, there's a starting point and then it's like, where do I want to get to? It's like, I want to get this degree. And it's like, okay, how do I get this degree? I have to do all this stuff. And it's like, oh, I don't care. I'm just going to go with, just do it, you know, just get it. You know, I just want the degree. That's it. You know, rather than kind of realizing, okay, there's classes I have to take along the way, and they're put there for a reason. It's to teach you what
Yeah.
they believe that you need to know to be capable at the job that you're trying to get.
Yeah.
And even if you don't agree with the classes or whatnot, you know, why not try to learn how to enjoy
Right.
them to some extent, get something from them, you
Right.
know? And I think that kind of like brings some open-mindedness that can help you like learn better and grow better. So
Yeah. And I think like on top of that, I think it even goes deeper. Is like, think about in the class, like you have to have the ability to learn. Like you have to know how to teach yourself things. Like that's a skill. That's a psychological skill. You need to have like a specific level of focus. You need to have like the ability to tolerate stress. Like how do you deal with negative emotions that pop up during stress when you're studying and you can't figure out a problem? Like have you ever like had a math problem that's like so infuriating that like you start to just like get
yeah,
enraged? Like I've like cried over math problems before. Like
dude, yeah,
that's and it's like you don't think about the emotion, like that part of it that you need to do in order to get that degree, to get to your physical goal. It's like that's going to require an ability to like process your negative emotions and like overcome them. Like that there's so much depth to like that you don't even realize to gain, like that are inside, like these inside things that you need to deal with to get the outside things, you know?
yeah, man. I think that's another thing, you know, that I'm learning right now within school is how to navigate it better because you know, I was diagnosed with ADHD at a younger age, or younger age meaning like seventh or eighth grade. Um, and I think back in seventh and eighth grade, I kind of took that as like, oh, I don't sit still, I don't focus well, I don't do school well, you know, rather than actually understanding what it meant for me. And that's kind of what's helped me realize that I don't like labels very much, is because
Yeah.
I always labeled myself as ADHD rather than saying like,
Yeah.
you know, I, you know, need to work on the X, Y,
Yeah.
and Z, you know, and I think that's
Yeah.
kind of where I'm at right now is kind of
Right.
learning the X, Y, and Z rather than just going
Right.
with, oh, I have ADHD, I can't do this.
Yeah. It's like you say like the label of ADHD then leads you to think like, oh, like I'm gonna have trouble with this. This is gonna be harder for me, and that this is gonna be like I'm like it's almost like a victim thing of like, oh, like this makes it difficult. Like I don't know if I can do this. Versus thinking like, I know that I have trouble focusing, so let me attack my difficulty in focusing.
Hmm.
You know, instead of like just taking out like I definitely see what you're saying about how like labels can be harmful, and it's like go beyond the label. What is it that you really need to focus on versus like taking on this label? Because I know people that like have been diagnosed with things and then like it becomes like their personality, you know?
Yeah.
And like like obviously like if they have stuff to go that they're going through, like I'm not like saying that they're bad for having those issues, but like some people like get that and then they like revel in it. Like they revel in their like mental illness and they like make sure that people like it becomes like part of their identity, you know?
Yeah, and I think for me it was part of my identity for a while. And then I started to kind of realize that like I can do this. And then I kind of started to branch away from that identity. And I think that's what really helped me get out of that box. And now I would say, you know, like, yeah, I feel like I have remnants of, you know, like what people would call ADHD, but I think I've come a long way in terms of getting rid of it. And I feel like I've like, you know, not completely taken away from where I was before, but I think I made such a big jump from it. And, you know, I think it's due to just breaking out of that box and quit having the labels on myself, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. It's because it's like there's so much. Because like if you think about like all of these labels are just like human constructs. Like somebody at one point, one doctor was like, oh, like this set of symptoms, let's just like to make things easier on the system, let's just like call it this name, you
Right.
know? But like that's like before somebody said that, like this thing is ADHD, or this thing is like anxiety, or this set of symptoms is depression. Like nobody called it that. It was just like it was an experience. It was like a set of symptoms. And like before that, like I think it's important to like look like all these things aren't just the label, aren't just this like this entity that has been constructed by some scientist. Like it goes deeper than that, and it goes further out than that, and it goes deeper, and it can't just be explained in like a word and a definition, you know?
Right, right. Like it almost feels like, these labels are like kind of like cheap ways out in a sense, and like you said, not to discount anybody who is going through any of these things, because like
Right.
it's
Yeah, because the
real.
experience is real, you
Yeah,
know?
exactly. But in like, I guess, pure like logical terms, it's kind of just like a cheap way out of saying like, oh, I have ADHD, because like I know for a fact that I use that as a cheap way out. Not to say everybody does, but I've used it as a cheap way out of saying like oh,
Yeah.
I have ADHD, like I can't do that, like I'm bad at that. So, but
Yeah.
then like I said before, just breaking out of that and realizing like, okay, there's issues at hand, how do I fix these issues? And let's like do it
Right.
one at a time,
Yeah.
And that's like where the real growth lies, is when you can see the
Definitely.
issue
Dang.
and fix it.
Yeah, and I think it's good to hear like from you specifically, who like has a diagnosis of something, and like to hear your perspective on like, I don't know, it's like I can theorize about it, and like I'm not diagnosed with anything, but I have like symptoms of like different things, but I'm not diagnosed with any of them. But I think like, so I can relate to some of the symptoms of different like anxiety and depression. Like I definitely have bouts of all of those. But to hear like your perspective, who's like been diagnosed, like I think, is there like some sort of like trauma that comes along with like getting diagnosed? Like is there baggage to having the label?
Oh, absolutely. And I think the baggage is just the fact that it kind of like just throws you into this group, and like there you are, like, and like I was
Yeah.
never like really helped. Like it ended up that I was the one that had to help myself
Yeah.
and
Dang.
figure out what was going on, and that's what made it so hard. And I'm genuinely so lucky. Like I feel so lucky, I should say. I feel so lucky that I figured it out, because I don't know where I'd be right now if I didn't figure it out. And I'm at least somewhat early in my life, and I can't imagine people who figure it out in their like late 40s or however old,
Yeah.
and went through half their life not understanding any of it really, and just going with like, oh, I have ADHD, you know.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. And then they like they take like the label like hook, line, and sinker,
Hmm.
when it's like, okay, well, no, like you've fallen for the trap. You haven't like, now you've just like become a victim to the ADHD, rather than like, and not everyone does this, but like
Yeah,
instead of like taking it and using it as a tool, like now you know that this set of symptoms plagues you. Now you can like work with that, versus like being doomed to having the label, and then being like, now you're like, oh, this is, life's gonna be harder for me now. It's like, no, life has always been the same for you, but now you have a label,
yeah,
you
exactly.
know,
That's the only difference. Yeah.
and that
And
can
now,
be.
sorry, were you
Go
gonna say
ahead.
something?
No, go ahead.
So, as someone who hasn't been diagnosed with anything, but you say you have like symptoms of things, how do you respond to the labels?
How do I respond to labels? I definitely don't like them. I feel like, hmm,
like kind of what I was thinking asking that question is, like, for example, anxiety or depression or whatever, like, do you feel like you think like, do I have this, or like what, like do you like feel like you throw yourself into that pool?
I think if anything, like the thing that I experience the most would be like, I get pretty bad mood swings, and so there are times where I wonder like, am I bipolar, But like I don't. The thing is like I don't want to like. That's the best way to describe it. Is like it feels kind of bipolar sometimes, but when I
Mhm.
say that, like I don't want to like claim bipolar, because like I haven't been diagnosed with that. But at the same time, it's like I'm allowed to say that like I have bad mood swings that resemble bipolar sometimes, even though I'm not like, I don't want people to get offended. It's like the fact that this label, like if you don't have this label, then it's like now you're not justified in like feeling a certain way. It's like, oh, like you're not diagnosed with anxiety. It's like, well, I'm still fucking anxious sometimes, you know?
Yeah.
And so I think labels can also discredit people that don't have the label too. When it's like,
Mhm.
no, it's like I have these experiences too. I just maybe they're not as severe, maybe like they're not as often, but
Or maybe
I
just
just
not
haven't been
diagnosed.
labeled.
Yeah,
Yeah. So
exactly.
that's the other side of labeling is it discredits people without the label.
Right, absolutely. It kind of like creates like an in group and an out group, and I feel like
Yeah.
saying what we're saying right now, like a lot of people would maybe be turned off by that because of like what you said, like you're
Right.
not diagnosed with it or anything like that, but
Yeah.
it's the truth. It's how you feel, and I think like
Yeah.
if people don't like to hear how you feel, then you know they
They're
I don't
probably avoiding something in themselves. Like if
yeah,
that's triggering something in you, like what is that telling you that you're resisting in yourself, you know?
exactly. Yeah.
Or maybe
Yeah.
that means that you're highly identified with whatever group you're part of and that this is like threatening that identity, that ego. If
Right.
that if this is upsetting you, like I don't know, maybe that means that you are really ingrained in your identity as having whatever you have. And
Yeah.
I don't
Yeah, and
know.
maybe try to maybe not try to totally disidentify so you don't feel like
Yeah.
you've just lost a part of your life, but maybe slowly try to disidentify and see how that feels.
Yeah, I'm not at all attacking anybody that like
No, no,
has
no.
anything. I just like it's just like an interesting thing to talk about and like dive into, and especially like I feel like right now like a lot of people are offended by a lot of things, and so I think it's fun to like play like devil's advocate to like
Oh yeah.
try to get into that perspective too, because it is like an undervalued perspective sometimes when it doesn't go along with the norm.
Yeah, absolutely. And playing devil's advocate kind of leaves doors open, and
Yeah,
kind of doesn't keep your mind from picking one side or the other. It kind of leaves those possibilities out on the floor, which I find to be very important in
yeah,
growing.
yeah,
And sometimes it might come out wrong, and sometimes it might sound
yeah.
ignorant or something like that. Maybe we've sounded ignorant this episode. Who knows?
Right. True. That's true. I think like it's an art form to be able to like argue and discuss controversial topics in a way that like everybody feels heard and like not like if you can talk about an offensive thing and not offend people, like I think that's like an art. Like I think comedy is part. I think like if you have a good sense of humor and make people laugh when you're talking about something, like that can help open people up to the possibility of it, you know?
Yeah, absolutely. That's shoot on the
But
topic
that's
of
tough. I'm not a comic. I'm not very good at that, you know?
right. Yeah, yeah. But no, that's a good point you bring up. That is really hard because all the pressure is just crazy. I can't imagine
Yeah.
standing up on a stage with all that pressure live.
Yeah. And then
But
thinking like, oh yeah, even just like do you ever like talk about something like controversial and you're like, "Oh shoot, like I just said something and I can tell people didn't like it." And you're like, "Oh, dang, I didn't want to turn people off, but you know, I feel like I especially on a university campus, like there's a lot of discussion, a lot of like groups and tribes of people that like have their identities and things that are easily offended, and like I'll say something but I don't mean to offend, I'm just trying to talk about something interesting, and then I'll be like, oh shoot, I said something not good,
yeah, yeah.
you know?
It's like you feel like you're kind of like walking on glass all of a sudden.
Yeah,
Yeah, no, I know exactly what you mean. I think generally speaking, I'm very much so the type of person that doesn't offend people. I mean, I hope, once again, this
yeah,
is how I think of myself, but that doesn't mean it's true. But I definitely relate to situations where I've said something and I'm like, oh, like I feel like that didn't go over too well, but
yeah. Yeah,
sometimes it's just kind of like, well, you know what? If it bothered them, I hope that they reach out to me, and or if they don't
right,
want to reach out to me, that's cool too.
true. Dang.
It's all about that equilibrium. And when your equilibrium's off, the people who you're around, theirs is going to be off too.
True. Like that people can sense like when something is off or like when you're kind of feeling like uncomfortable. It's like like that feeling of uncomfortability like is like felt. Like
Yeah.
It's like if you're nervous to like talk to somebody and then like you go talk to them and you're kind of nervous, like they can tell that you're like feeling nervous about it, you know?
Oh yeah. Yeah,
And so like
absolutely.
I don't really know what this was related to actually. I forget like what I was trying to relate this to. What were we talking about? Something about
Um
equilibrium?
yeah, and like how like when the balance is off, like when you're off, like the people you're around are off.
Oh yeah. Yeah,
And
but then I feel pressure then of being like if I'm feeling sad or anxious, then it's like I don't want to make other people feel sad or anxious, but I also want to be authentically myself, you know?
yeah.
So if I'm feeling sad, like I'm gonna let myself feel sad. And if that somehow comes across as like you now think that I'm being mean, but I'm not being mean. I'm just kind of like have a depressed demeanor. You know what I mean? So it's like that's something that's interesting is the balance between like being authentically like re- releasing of your emotions, just like being in your emotions authentically, but also at the same time, like not wanting to like transmit that vibe to someone else. Like that's tough.
I'm sorry, your microphone and video was very fuzzy there.
Oh no, you've been a little fuzzy too. I'm hoping that um this like takes the best quality from each of our like. Do you know what I'm saying? Like it uploads the best like of my quality, and then it uploads from your end the best of your quality into one video. Like I hope that's what it does, or you know what I mean?
Yeah, yeah, that would be great.
I don't
Hope
know.
so
We'll
too.
find out
Because now
after
I
this
can at
episode.
least hear you.
Okay, that's good. I hope that like it does. I hope it records the best of both of us. But we'll find out. Like I'll like watch this later and see how it looks.
Yeah, absolutely.
But dang,
Okay.
that's okay.
Um,
We're in the testing phases. It's okay if we have some mess ups. That way, these mess ups. If you're witnessing these fuzzy videos and fuzzy audio now, that means that in the future, if you tune in, we'll have that hopefully fixed.
yeah, that would be awesome. It's gonna be
I
great,
hope
man.
so. I want to have this. I want this to be a pretty legit and like watchable, listenable podcast that is tolerable and in good quality. Like I want this to be. I hope our listeners will enjoy our show and won't get turned off by any fuzzy quality.
Yeah,
You know,
yeah, that'd be great. Because
that would be
I
great.
we definitely are putting in effort, and
Yeah, yeah,
we might not have the technology right now, but
yeah.
I think the core of it is still there. It's us
hmm
talking. So
We have good intent. We have good. We got some like good. You know, the quality of the video might be bad, but the quality of the thoughts are
yeah,
high.
yes,
You
quality
know,
over quality.
the quality of the conversation is good.
Yes, absolutely. Uh,
So
but how long are we going? By the way, I hate to ask this like right on air, but
no, you're good. I don't know. We can. Do you want to go for like an hour today?
that's perfect.
Okay.
So do you happen to recall what you were saying before the whole fuzziness? Because I couldn't
Oh,
pick up what you were saying at all.
right. I was talking about like the balance of like balancing being authentically emotional and expressing your emotions authentically and being and not like stifling them or repressing them. But at the same time, I I feel pressure when I'm around other people to like I don't want to bring them down. I don't want to transmit my vibe, my anxious vibe, my depressive vibe, whatever emotion I might be feeling. It's like I want to like put on a front so that they can like feel better and I don't want to bring them down. But at the same time, like that's in conflict with me expressing my emotions genuinely, you know?
Hmm. And how does that like combination of like wanting to be authentic but also wanting to make people feel comfortable? How does that work?
I think what works best for me, and I think the answer is just like brutal honesty is like if you're with somebody and you're like I think what helps is just like saying it out loud and being like, hey guys, like I'm just feeling like pretty down, like but I'm just like feeling down and that's kind of where I'm at. I don't want to bring you guys down. So don't think that I'm like judging you or like or I'm like being mean to you or anything because it's really an inner issue with me. It has nothing to do with you. So if you think that like because I'm in this like down demeanor, it's not because of you. It's because it's really just something that I need to feel right now. So I think like that disclaimer like
Mhm.
allows a lot of room for everybody involved, that like now they understand and now you give yourself permission to feel authentically how you feel.
Yeah, that's a really good, insight, because I feel like that's something that I could do better myself. Um,
But it's tough because you
yeah.
don't all the time want to like say that
Oh yeah,
either,
absolutely not. Yeah,
you
yeah.
know?
It can feel really weird, even though that's just how you feel. But
Right.
I feel
Or
like, what were you saying?
or just with strangers. Like that's something
Oh
you don't
yeah,
want to really
yeah,
at that point you just got to say, you know what? Like I can't control how people are going to perceive me
right. Yeah,
and
yeah,
I'm going to be as authentic to myself as I need to be right now.
yeah, yeah. I go. Yeah, absolutely. It definitely is dependent on the situation. But like you were saying about how you'll put on a front. I feel like I'm good at doing that in a lot of situations. And I say good, but I don't. It
Right.
isn't good all the
You're
time.
effective
Yeah,
at it.
I'm effective. Yes, yes, yes. I feel I'm very effective in that. And like a word that I think of when I think of that is like suppressing, because it like suppresses how I feel to make others feel good, or at
Yeah.
least feel comfortable or whatever.
Yeah.
Because that's all I ever shoot for.
Yeah. True. So then it's like you're like you have to make a decision then about like do I make this other person feel good right now or do I like try to help myself or like what's the balance and
Hmm.
I don't know but maybe making them feel good by repressing it like ultimately makes you feel a little better yourself
Yeah,
like
and sometimes I feel that is the case.
sometimes like my intuitions feel at least for me personally I feel like it's always better to be like genuine
Mhm.
and how you're feeling.
No, and I agree. Overall, like overwhelmingly, I do agree. Because I've definitely had situations where I have said how I feel, and I pretty sure looking back on every one of those situations where I've done that, that I can recall, I felt great after saying it. Like
Yeah.
it's like a
Yeah.
weight lifted off your back.
Oh my gosh. Yes. That reminds me. Someone like really close to me recently, like was feeling like really down and depressed and like I and but they were like stuck. Like they felt like they were stuck in their emotions and they weren't like letting themselves like express their emotions. It's like they felt like they had all this anxiety and depression like building up inside and it wasn't going anywhere. Like it wasn't getting expressed. And I think what they were doing was they were trying to like appease me by not, like they were trying to like make sure that I felt good. So they were trying to suppress those emotions. And eventually I was like, you just like let it out. Like I don't care. Like if you need to cry right now, like I'm not judging you at all. Like go ahead and like let it out. Like that if that's really what you need to do, like let it out. And like
Hmm.
I was like, just let the resistance go. I was like guiding them through, like letting their emotions like be expressed. And eventually, like they just started like breaking down and crying. And I was like, yes, like good. Like I'm so proud of you for like being so vulnerable right now to do that and being genuinely like sad and anxious and just let it all out. Tell me all about it. Like cry it out. And after like 10 minutes, like they felt so good. Like they felt
Hmm.
so good. It just needed to be like expressed.
Yeah, absolutely, man. Those kind of conversations and like interactions with others is just like you couldn't trade it for anything, because
Yeah.
like that's where you find solutions almost to
Yes.
problems. Like even though you're not directly maybe finding it,
Yeah.
it feels like you can see it now.
This is like what I was talking about as in the beginning of the podcast. Like suffering is grace. It's
Oh.
like this is one example of like letting go into the suffering, just letting go into the emotion, expressing it, letting it flow. Like if you were to let go of all resistance right now in this moment, how would it come out? How would you feel? Where would your emotions go? like how to be expressed. If you just let go of all resistance, like no self judgment, no worry about how people are going to perceive you, like just no worry about how you're going to feel, just feel like, then you feel like it comes out and then you feel so good. And it's like this suffering, letting yourself suffer properly leads to like peace in like, peace is the best word. It's just like this like state of like, like let the tension go, like,
Hmm.
you know,
Yeah, yeah, like
that's what I felt.
yeah, man, like nothing beats that. Like just the feeling of just letting something off your shoulders and just letting everything be, you know. That's like
Yes.
one of the actually in my first journal that I ever did, I wrote something, and as I was writing, I said something like "let it be," and then I instantly like double underlined "be" because it like resonated with me in that moment of like, dude, that's all you got to do. You just got to be, you know, because
Yeah.
like I that it just like it's a weight lifted off your shoulder when
Yes.
you can learn how to just accept the present for what it
Yeah.
is. You know, the past already happened, and the future is gonna
Baby.
happen, but you know what? We're right here in the present. That's the only place that you're at right now.
That's the key. Have you heard like
Hmm.
well, I guess I don't know. I've heard this like story about like a young monk was trying to learn Buddhism and how to be free, spiritually free, liberated. And he was like meditating one day and he was just like frustrated. And he went to his master and he was like, I'm so frustrated. Like, I just I can't let go of my anger. Like, I'm just so angry. Like, I'm trying to let go of that. And his master's like, great, go be the Buddha of anger. Like, go sit there and just be furious, be enraged. Like, if that's how you are right now, like, that's all you need to be. Like, just be the Buddha of anger. And then he goes back and meditates on and like just lets himself be angry until it like, and it's like that moment when you're in the moment, like you're not resisting the anger anymore. Now you're just in the moment of just fury and you're letting it rise up. And then afterwards, like it dissipates if you let
Yeah.
it be expressed in the way that it needs to be expressed, you know?
Yeah, and I think that's something that anybody who's meditated probably has come across at one point or another, which is that anger that you can feel. And like that example exactly is what, you know, helps me personally get through those moments of anger in my meditation, and just like the frustration of
Yeah.
not being able to, you know, do anything, not being able to think of anything. Like yes, you're thinking, but you don't, but you want to be doing something. You want to like be thinking about your to-do list or whatever, you know,
Yeah.
and just that like can be very frustrating and angering. But just kind of letting it dissipate, like you said, and just like feeling it before it dissipates kind of just gets you through and into this like new zone of presentness, you know.
Right. Dang.
It's awesome.
Have you been meditating much?
No, actually, well, you know, I kind of like realized something recently, and that's that I feel like I had too constrained of a definition of what meditation was for myself. Like meditation was always like, oh, like sitting here with my eyes closed and like setting a timer, you know. And while that is like a more controlled way of meditating, I realized that I meditate a lot without even like thinking about meditating, in terms of like, you know, sometimes before class, like I'll get there early, like 15 minutes early or something like that, and I'll just be like sitting there just like thinking, like, because like I tried not to
Yeah.
do my phone because I want to just like let that go before class, and so I'll
Yeah.
just be sitting there and then I'll be thinking, and then I realize like that's a form of meditation, you know.
Right. And you know what? You can meditate. Like, let's say you have the urge to pull out your phone, look at it. Like, you can meditate in the process of pulling out your phone and
Yeah,
looking at it. It's like not even like it's good to like, this is just like one perspective. Like, yes, like it's good to like have the phone away, no distraction, like just like kind
hmm,
of meditate in the moment. But then can you take that same focus and like presentness as you're pulling out your phone and typing in your passcode and opening Instagram? Like, can you have that same like presence as you're doing that too? Like, that's a meditation too, you know?
yeah, yeah, man. That it, like just being deliberate is
Yes.
meditative. Is that the right word?
Meditative. Yeah.
Meditative, meditative. Yeah, yeah, that's
Yeah.
okay. But
Definitely.
yeah, Yeah, I mean, I have a vivid memory of like this was like probably a year and a half ago of like in the middle of a meditation. I wasn't like thinking about doing this because I was so present that I opened my eyes and I picked up my water bottle and then I opened it and took a sip and I was like so focused on that and it felt so good. That drink felt so good and like
Yeah.
replenishing and everything. And then it clicked with me that like wow, like this is like I was still meditating while that happened, you know,
Yeah.
and being deliberate about it is and thinking about every step of what I was doing. Like this is, you know, it's amazing what your mind can do, you know.
Yeah. Dang. I like I'm getting more frequent about like remembering to be like mindful in the moment, but like I can go like an entire day and like not be mindful and then like at the end be like, oh my gosh, like I forgot, and then you're like you remember, and then for like a second you're just like so present, you're like, oh, now it's like it's relief when you like finally remember to like be mindful. You're like, oh, that it feels good when you remember, and then you remember more often. You're like, ah, I don't know,
Yeah,
it's
yeah.
nice to remember.
I feel like the more you can get like your feet wet in that water and like start like just thinking about it, you know, like the more that you can do it, you know, because I feel like
Yeah.
what helped me a lot was for a long time, like a year and a half, I would carry my journal everywhere I went. Like it might not always be in my hand, but like if I'm going somewhere in my car, I bring it, you know, and if I'm going to the
Yeah,
mall, like
interesting.
I'm bringing it, I'm leaving it in the car, like, and it just kind of like reminded me to be mindful, and
Yeah.
you know, and I think that's something that I lost for a little while is I wasn't carrying it around and I wasn't being as mindful, and I'm not saying it
Right.
was just due to me not carrying it around, but I think carrying it around helped me be mindful,
Yeah.
so
It's like
yeah,
it was like a reminder of like, oh, like I'm on the path of trying to become freer and breaking out of these boxes, and like that's like your journal is like a symbol for that. And so when you like go back in your car and you see your journal, you're like, oh, like let me take a moment
exactly,
to be mindful. And I know you journal a lot. Like, what is that a big tool for you? Like what do you
yeah.
talk to me about like journaling?
It's a massive tool, man. Like as somebody like I said who got diagnosed with ADHD, you know, I think a lot of ADHD is not having like a sequence of thoughts that are very I'm sorry, can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you. And you know what? I'm actually seeing like a message on here that says actual recording is higher quality. So like
I
it,
can
even though
kind
it
of
looks
you were
like
like sound like I'll give it a
okay, so
second to
like
recover.
can you hear me? Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you now.
Okay.
Are you able to hear
I'm
me?
like I'm getting a
Okay.
yes, I can hear you. I see a message that says actual recording is higher quality. So like it I think it is recording the best from each of ours.
Oh, okay, okay, awesome. Awesome. All right. Um well, back to your question then of you know, journaling. Um, yeah, it's a massive tool for me. And I think as someone who was diagnosed with ADHD at a younger age, I kind of like always had this thought of like, oh, like I can't focus well, and like you know, I feel like that just kind of like scrambled my mind in a sense because it kind of made me just kind of like like I said, like the cheap out like I was talking about of just like, oh, I have ADHD, I can't do this, you know, and it like scrambled my mind in so many ways. But journaling is a way to put my mind on paper, and when I do that, I just keep going, I just keep going, and like until I don't feel like it, and it's you know, besides putting my thoughts on paper, and like being able to just get them out onto paper, going back and
Yeah.
reading it is like such a treat, you know, because
Yeah.
it, it it's like seeing the progress of where I've come from and seeing what I did yesterday and how I was feeling yesterday. Like you catch patterns, and when you catch
Right.
these patterns, like for me specifically, I feel like I am able
Yeah.
to fix them and make them better for myself.
Yeah. I mean, that like I think, remember we were talking about how like earlier we were talking about like this, the process
Hmm.
of like putting together little like pieces of the puzzle together, like little bits and pieces until you get a bigger picture. It's like,
Yeah,
it's like that bigger picture, that puzzle is like a series of patterns, you know? And if you can like like it sounds like journaling is a good way to like capture the patterns. Then like, it's like if you're being mindful and putting in those pieces of the puzzle and you're journaling, it's now you're like doubling the rate of the patterns you're finding,
exactly, exactly.
you
Because
know?
I think I said this previously, but I wasn't journaling for a while, and I looking back on it, that while that I wasn't journaling, I felt far less mindful and far less productive and far less growth coming from that's those specific months.
Yeah.
And ever since I began journaling, probably about a month ago, or like restarted journaling, man, like the I feel like things are coming back into place for me.
Nice. That's awesome.
What about you? Do you have any forms of journaling or anything that you do?
You know, I haven't been journaling in a really long time. I don't know. I really don't know. For me, for some reason, it's like not. Maybe I should get more into it. But like recently, I have not been, and it hasn't been super helpful for me in the past. And you know why? It's for me. It's like it becomes like a chore, and I like start to like resent it almost. You know.
Yeah.
But like I totally see the benefit, and I think like if I were to do it in a like a lower pressure way, in a way
Mhm.
that like
Mhm.
uh, like if I didn't have to like whip myself to get to do it, like I think like it would be really beneficial. But because like I don't really enjoy it that much, it like becomes more of a burden than it does like a help. Even though I know the benefits, you know,
Yeah.
and I think like for someone who does enjoy it and sees the benefit, like that's like great.
Mhm.
But I don't know why it like is difficult for me to get myself to do it.
Yeah, no, and that's a super good point that I'm glad you brought up because I like, this isn't me trying to like convince you to do it because like you said, like what works for you works for you, what works for me what works for me. But just as something to say about my experience with it is I went through that exact kind of phase where it became a chore and I was like trying to do it every day. And if I didn't do it a day, I'd feel like, oh, like I didn't do it. Like like I'll do it tomorrow, and then and then eventually it's like, oh, I don't feel like doing this because like you said, it's a chore.
Yeah.
Um, and I was telling my therapist about that one time and he was like, well, you don't have to journal if you don't want to journal, and
Yeah.
if you deep down do want to journal, maybe tell yourself, if if I want to just go into my journal today and all I feel like writing is like I'm having a good day or I'm having a bad day or like what's up, and that's all you really feel like, then by all means do that. Or if you don't feel like doing
Yeah.
it at all, don't do it.
Yeah.
But what helped me was just keeping the journal around because there were times that I found like I'd be out and about and I'd be like, oh, I really want to journal all of a
Yeah.
sudden, and then boom, like I would have it and then I would do it. So that was kind of like that's kind of my form of low pressure is just having it with me so that if I
Yeah.
want to do it, I can. But if I don't do it for a month, I don't do it for a month.
Right. It's like write like when you're inspired to write, but if you're not, like don't force yourself to.
Exactly, exactly. And I feel like
Yeah.
also I've learned with journaling how to not force myself, but I feel like I could pick it up and journal anytime I wanted to now because
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
I think it's due to the lack of pressure because I've just kind of like said like, hey, if I want to
Yeah.
journal, I can.
Versus like if you like felt like you needed to every day, like then you would get kind of like sick of it.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. And then it wouldn't feel authentic to me.
Yeah. Definitely.
And I mean, sometimes it doesn't feel authentic to me. Sometimes like it'll start off feeling like I feel fine. Like I'm at school today, like just got out of class, and then all of a sudden like something will click with me. I'm like, oh wait, and I wanted to talk about this.
Yeah.
So but that's my experience with it.
Nice. That's cool. That is some good stuff. Good insightful stuff. I'm
Yeah,
thinking we should like start wrapping up here soon.
yeah, for sure. Did you have any
Um,
last thoughts or anything?
I guess I want to say we're gonna start putting these podcasts into really digestible small clips on YouTube. Um, so if you're listening all the way to this point, check out our YouTube, the Boundless Enigma clips. I don't know what we'll name it something that is related to this podcast and has to do with clips of the podcast. So stay tuned for that. We'll get that set up soon, and we'll hopefully get everything of this like set up. We'll get all our branding and our intro done, and you guys can enjoy that. And Sam's working on some art, I believe, some cover art for our podcast. So we're going to get all that set up in the next few days, next few weeks. And yeah, thanks for joining us. Thanks for listening.
Yeah.
If anyone is even listening to this point, I hope you are.
Yeah, that'd be awesome, man. And I'd like to say thank you too, because it's it feels amazing to be able to talk about this kind of stuff, and especially if people want to hear about it, that's just like a cherry on top. So
right.
Until next time.
Well, until next time, join us for the next episode next week, maybe, of the Boundless Enigma podcast. All right.